I think we miss only Adam, the most important person here. So as I said before, we will have participants here on Zoom, but also it will be the debate on live on Facebook.
Hello.
Hello again.
Do you want me to call Adam?
If you could, I would be really grateful. Thank you.
Okay. Here he is.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Adam. Nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Everything is fine, almost.
Great.
Thank you for sending us the paper. The
You're
collection.
welcome.
Is it a publication by your Wroclaw Academy, or is it a news a periodical?
No, it will be a. If I can join, because
Of
I'll
course,
be presenting.
jump in.
We will publish it, but we will be sending together with the magazine to our subscribers. But we can send you some copies for you, but it will be separate because it's 58 pages. So it's actually not so thin, you know? Yeah. So we will, today we'll present the electronic copy, and quite soon, like this week or next week, we'll try to print them because we'll be soon shipping the issue to the subscribers.
I see.
Yeah.
Maybe next time I pick it up if it's easier
Okay,
for.
but
all
if
of
you
us.
would like, we can also send you a few copies. Up to you.
Okay. Okay.
Adam, what is it? What do you mean by closing remarks? Because I might need to leave before 6 o'clock. Do you mean by closing remarks that just somebody will thank the participants, or do you want the panelists to express their closing remarks about the film? I don't know.
In fact, I thought that we should finish before we are going to screen the movie.
Okay. Okay.
You know.
Okay. And who is delivering the closing remarks? You are.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's up to you. If you want to, we can change a little bit.
No,
program.
it's perfect. It's perfect. Don't change anything.
Okay.
I will not talk a lot about the publication because people should read the publication. So I will just introduce that it has been published, show the cover, say a few words about the main theme, but I'm not going into details about the articles. Yeah.
Fine.
Great. I think that participants are joining, so maybe we can just wait.
Okay.
Till 4 p.m. Thank you.
Yep.
I think my image is a bit distorted.
No, you look good.
Was it a joke or not?
It is not your fault.
No, really. No. It's perfect.
So the meeting will be registered. So at 4 I will start recording. Okay.
Okay. Are we going to show all panelists, or what is the idea? Or only me at the beginning? What is going to be set up, our setup at the beginning?
You can present all panelists at the beginning because
No, I mean concerning our viewers, they are going to see all of us, or
yes,
only
exactly.
me?
No, all be seen.
Okay.
Seriously, how do you see me? Am I distorted on your screens or not?
Your shirt is somehow glimpsing. It's your face is okay, but there is a kind of brightening effect on your shirt. I don't know how you do it. It's wonderful.
Special effects. Special effects.
Because I can
That's
see
Hollywood.
myself distorted. It's even difficult for me to keep the center of the image.
Okay, it's 4, so we are starting.
Okay.
Maybe we can wait 2 more minutes, okay?
Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone. The meeting will be recorded and we are starting now.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. My name is Balcer. Let me introduce myself at the very beginning. So I'm a senior fellow at WiseEuropa, a private independent Polish think tank, which in fact is the leader of our project. And at the same time, I work as program director at the Jan Nowak-Jagielloński College of Eastern Europe. So let me make a short joke, because we are going to talk about Central Europe. So we can say that I'm a little bit like Franz Josef, Kaiser und König, emperor and king, because I'm double-headed right now. So first of all, why we are meeting today? That's the last event, in fact, virtual Brussels, because we are supposed to meet in person in Brussels, but we are meeting because of the pandemic COVID online of our project. The project is the EU project co-funded by the European Commission in the framework. We are implementing this project together with our partners, Institut für Europäische Politik from Berlin, Hungarian Europe Society from Budapest, and also Metropolitan Prague University. And of course, we have also on board the College of Eastern Europe, and last but not least, our great friends from Gdańsk. What we have already done within the framework of our project, we have organized several events in Berlin, Gdańsk, Budapest, and Prague. That's the last event right now in virtual Brussels. And of course, the main our main outcome of our project is definitely our documentary movie, which you are going to watch after our debate. And also we organized a student competition. And today we are meeting because we would like to talk about Europe's East-West divide. It's myth, or is it a myth or reality? That's the title of our debate. And at the same time, we would like to, because that's another our important outcome is, of course, our special issue of New Eastern Journal. That's a magazine, a monthly magazine, which is published by the College of Eastern Europe in English. And right now, I would like to give the floor to Iwona Reichardt, who is going to present the magazine. So without further delay, please, Iwona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to be the participant in this discussion today. As Adam said, part of the project that was implemented by a team of partners, of international partners, and which focused on 1989, the memory of 1989 and 2004 in Europe and in specific countries. We prepared a publication of articles authored by our partner, authors from our partner organizations or affiliated with them. Let me show you, let me share a screen with you. Just 1 second. Okay, this publication has been edited by Adam, and it will be distributed together with our magazine called New Eastern Europe, which focuses specifically on the post-Soviet space, but also countries that were once part of the socialist bloc or under its influence. The title of the publication, as you see, is a European success story, but with a question mark. So the authors critically look at what happened in that period of time between 1989 and 2004 and beyond, meaning they look at the great hope that the revolutions of 1989 and the later expansion, enlargement of the European Union that took place in 2004 meant for the region and specific countries, and what actually later not necessarily ended up so positively, as we see especially in the case of Hungary and Poland. However, even Czechia, which has less of the negative experiences as Poland and Hungary currently do, also shows some concern and problems that accompanied and characterized the transformation process. The same can be said about Germany, which had in 1999 got reunited after a long period of separation of the existence of two parallel German states. And yet the reunification, which took place in 1999, when looked from today's perspective, was not only a success story, as we see in the title. I don't want to say too much about the topic, as we will discuss some of these aspects today during the panel, as some of the authors are participating in our event today. I would like to encourage you to read the publication. It will be also available online in open access, but available also in a paper edition free of charge. We are happy to ship it to you. I would just like to finish that we end with the publication, we complete the publication with the voices of two young representatives of the future generation, the two students who won the essay contest that Adam mentioned already. And I have to say that when I was reading their essays, I was very impressed with their judgment, with their interpretation of the current situation, And it gives me hope that if other representatives of their generation think the way they do, we should be okay. But of course, these are the winners of the contest. So let's see and talk today about also what's ahead of us. And with this, I would like to pass the floor to Adam again.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Iwona, for your short introduction. Definitely, I would like only to add that besides experts who are our partners from our organizations, partner organizations, and also students, winners, the winners of our contest. At the same time, we also have an article written by the mayor of Gdańsk, Aleksandra Durkiewicz, because everything started in Gdańsk, according to Gdańsk, and they are to a certain degree right because of the role of solidarity movement. So it's really not only long articles written by experts, but you can find here different forms. And at the same time, I think, of course, it's that's another Polish joke. It's very difficult to be a judge in your own case, but I would say that you can find also interesting illustrations, that it's not only text, but also some pictures. Okay, so thank you very much, Iwona, again. And right now I have really a great pleasure and honor to ask Professor Catherine Horel to give us a keynote speech. It's really, I said, I'm not exaggerating right now, a great honor and pleasure for me, because I read your books and I like them very much. And all of you, I strongly recommend you to read books that were published by Professor Horel. Definitely her spécialité de la maison is Hungary, and she wrote, for instance, an excellent biography of Admiral Horthy. She also wrote a very good history of Budapest, and also she has just published recently again a wonderful history of Hungarian nation. I think it was published just a few months ago. So really a great scholar is with us today, and I'm very happy. And of course, she received a lot of great awards. For instance, Prix Guizot, also Prix Ernest Lemonon. So really, we have a distinguished scholar with us today, and I would like to ask you, Professor Horel, to share with us, especially your opinion regarding, again, I will use my French, sorry, sometimes from my pronunciation, which is maybe sometimes horrible, but nevertheless, definitely, I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about longue durée. These trends which are of long duration, what kind of context we can observe impact of history, culture on especially processes taking place in our region, and the perception of the region, the image, the view of the region in the Western Europe. I have already said that you are really a great expert on Hungary, but you also publish a very good history of modern Central Europe from the beginning of the 19th century until exactly the beginning of the 21st century and the Big Bang enlargement of 2004. So please, Professor Horel, the floor is yours, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much for all these very pleasant introductory remarks and presentation of myself. I feel very flattered. I have to say that some of these books you mentioned are translated in Hungarian. So very sorry that French and Hungarian are maybe not the most shared languages, at least French was, but is no more the case. And if you don't know French, that maybe you could try Hungarian. Another very small remark. I have many hats on my head. One of these hats is to be the president of the International Committee for Historical Sciences. And I would like to, I told Isabella just before we started, I would like to invite everyone to attend our 22nd World Congress, which is going to take place at the end of August in Poznan. I will, after my talk, I will put in the chart, in the chat, I will put you the indication to make a little bit of advertising for this Congress. And I think that would be a very good occasion for many scholars of human sciences, so not only historians, to come to this Congress in Poznan. It will be a big event. After 2 years of postponing, we hope very much that this year everyone will be physically present in Poznan, because we refused for such a huge Congress with thousands of participants to have online Congress. It was too sad for us, so we preferred, it was the choice of the board, we preferred to postpone the Congress and to have it in real presence, so that people can really meet each other, and especially for the younger ones, for the doctorate students, for the posters, participants, and so on. That's absolutely crucial that they meet really with real people. So that was the real a very brief remark. The second one is I was very amused by Adam's indication that he feels a little bit like Kaiser Franz Joseph, being emperor and king. So as an historian, of course, and as an historian of 19th century Central Europe, which means Habsburg Empire, I'm particularly pleased to not have been the one who introduced Franz Joseph into the debate, but you did it, Adam. So thank you very much. It's very funny, and by the way, it's not completely out of place, which I will try to not demonstrate, but I will certainly speak of this Habsburg past, if not to speak about Habsburg nostalgia when we speak of Eastern Europe, Central Europe actually, and also to prove that East-West divide, when we think of East-West divide, we simply forgot the center. So I will try to move back to Central Europe, and maybe it will be a kind of introduction to the debate which is going to take place after, which intends to overcome this exaggeration of East-West divide, just like if there was no center. And well, I want to prove that there is a center. It was my job actually in the book, which was just mentioned about Central Europe. And the other maybe provocative question I would like to introduce first is this time from 89 to today, is it history? Historians are sometimes a little bit touchy about doing history without archives, and the former generation of professors and historians would not have considered this present day, or histoire du temps présent, as we say in French, and would have preferred to analyze facts, phenomenon, and so on, with the help of an extensive documentation, which means archives. So the first thing I would like to ask is, can we really reflect on the time passed since 89 as if it was history? I think we can. And one of the elements why I think we can is because we have something the former generations didn't, of historians, didn't take care to have, which means witnesses. So let's present it like this. If a younger scholar comes now, someone who is 25, 27 and comes now and says, I want to work on this time, he or she will consider it is history. And sometimes I do not consider it's history because I lived through it. I was a student in Vienna in 88, 89, and I can assure you that I spent more time over the border than in the lecture halls of the University of Vienna, because I really had the feeling something is happening and I have to be in the middle of it. So the methodological question is also, how do you work on a time, on a period which you know so well because you were a part of it, and not only witnessing from far away, I mean, through television or newspapers, but a period you had the chance, because I think it was a chance, it was an extraordinary opportunity. And I'm very happy to be so aged now that I can say I lived through it and I can tell you stories about that. Even if it's not history, it means stories, which is also another kind of methodological gap. And so how do you deal with this time when you are actor? If I do not pretend to have been an actor, I didn't make history. I was just on the spot, and I was able to take part in some of the events which took place, at least in Hungary, at the beginning of 89. Also in Vienna, I was at the burial of Zita. I was then at the reburial of Imre Nagy. I was at the European picnic and so on. So I have quite a lot of memories of that time. And there is a real difference between memory and history. And this is sometimes what our leaders of today's Central Europe tend to mix. They pretend to memorialize something which they call history, but it's not. It's memory politics. It is not the history made by historians. And this is also why many people are shocked by this manipulation or fake historical data, because sometimes they really can say, we were there, and it's not like you say it was. So this is also a very important factor we have to take into account when we work as historians on this time period, is that we have so many witnesses. And as you know, from the theoretician of memory, Maurice Halbwachs, you have as many memories as you have individuals. So even if there were 100,000 of people witnessing the burial of Imre Nagy, each one will tell you maybe another story of that day. So it's really a challenge in some ways to make history of that time period, taking into account all the levels of historical experience, memory experience we can have. And this is something we have to keep in mind all the time when we reflect on that period. So that was a brief, sorry, I was already too long, introductory remark. And I think that what is happening in those days now, I mean, with the tensions in Eastern Europe, it reminds me very much of the moment between 89 and 91, when there were quite a lot of tensions around the Baltic states, with this spectrum and this phantom of possible intervention of the not even at that time still existing Soviet Union. And it was a very tense period when the process that we are describing now was not so evident, was not so obvious in front of our eyes. We were not so sure at that time that what the whole of Central Europe, and what is Central Europe, by the way, but I will not annoy you about the definitions of Central Europe, but the different situations in the different countries, even the former countries belonging, I mean, in the real border of the Soviet Union, were not a ready-cut situation that was going to happen. Things evolved from the beginning of '89 to the collapse of the Soviet Union in '91. So sometimes when we read some descriptions of the integration process and the reunion process of Europe, these chronological, very, very precise steps are forgotten in the old picture, in the manuals, in the school books, and so on. And this is a really challenging point that we keep on reflecting on these chronological differences between the various countries. So another question I would like to raise is the phraseology we had at this time, which was, these countries are coming back to Europe. It is a return to Europe. And at one point, I can even remember the Austrian Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel saying, "Welcome back." And saying that as an Austrian Chancellor, it was quite, I mean, I'm sorry, stupid. So it was somehow an absurdity to pretend that these countries of Central Europe were not European. Of course, the idea was a very Western idea that was saying, they have been cut by the Iron Curtain from us. So you see already this exaggeration we are witnessing somehow these days as well, is that it is the West which defines what the East has to think. But this is not how people felt at that time. They were just as European as everyone in Europe. Only they had been, of course, in this very different situation in which they felt estranged from the Europe they belonged to since the Middle Ages. And this is really a first point, I think, a first element of misunderstanding between some Western decision makers and what they call East. You know, in France, in French, there is still quite a lot of people who persist on saying l'Europe de l'Est. And each time, not only me, but also colleagues and well-informed journalists say, well, wait a minute, it's over, game over since '89. So stop saying that. I mean, it's always putting this East-West divide from the West to the East. And this should really cease if we want to build on a more solid basis. So I would like to recall on this topic something everyone knows but has not read probably. It's the very, very famous article published by Milan Kundera in '83 in the French journal Le Débat. And in this article, Kundera was very much speaking of Central Europe. And in speaking of Central Europe, he was actually speaking of Western Europe, Western values, which were not only Western in the geographical sense, but Western in the philosophical sense, which meant democracy, liberal access to media, and so on. And this is not a chance that it was a Czech who said that. Because, of course, being from the Czech lands, he felt more attracted to Western civilization, Kultur, than maybe someone would have thought in Bucharest or somewhere else. So these differences are extremely important to understand, and they are very often not only forgotten, but simply ignored by many of our Western analysts and decision makers and even politologists and so on. So this idea of having been separated from the West is absolutely linked with the idea of having been a victim, of having been a victim of history, a victim of the great powers, and not only since the Second World War, but it's a very, very deeply rooted ancient feeling of not being deciding on the own fate of the country, and this is also something which is very lasting, burdening the societies of Central Europe, and this is also something that has to be overcome. It is very, very hard. Historians are really working on that, but again, some politicians, decision makers, and media people keep on nourishing the society with this idea of victimization and of trauma and of having been estranged from what should have been their fate. And this is also inseparable from the notion of backwardness, also a very heavy burden, very long-lasting, longue durée kind of phenomena. And this notion of backwardness is also an element of not the East-West divide, but the North-South divide. And this is also an element that is absolutely fascinating, because if you divide East and West and North and South, what remains? Only West, or is not the solution in really bringing all these parts together? And the point where all these parts have to be together is probably the center. So again, I preach for the coming back of Central Europe into the debate. It was actually a very crucial moment of the integration process. I suppose everybody remembers of the creation of the Visegrad group, and of this reunion of a smaller Europe, which would be Central Europe. And at that time, you remember there was the idea of having a step-by-step integration with some levels to attain before you enter into the Union. And one of these antechamber of the integration was maybe the Visegrad group, and at that time it was the idea of the negative idea of Prime Minister Václav Klaus, who said, oh, this is not interesting, we don't want to be part of this. He did it, but he said that he will not tolerate to be put in the waiting room for the European Union, and that it was not a place to be, and that he would not be content with somehow a smaller to be integrated Europe, and that the idea was to join right away the European Union. So the process of integration was also a very layered process that led to what we call now a success story, and I think we are right to call it a success story. But as you said in the introduction, both Isabella and Adam, is that we have, of course, parts of society, parts of the political elite, political groups that deny this success, and that try to convince their public opinions that the European Union is not a success, is something, you know, all these sentences like everything is decided in Brussels, Brussels is behaving with us like Moscow did, and all this kind of nonsense that unfortunately are swallowed by some parts of the European by the population, by the public opinion. And what of the another interesting point is to reflect on what would well, you know, normally it's the mortal sin of the historian to make anachronism and to say what would have been if, was wäre wenn, in German. But when the transformation of '89 occurred, in just the years before, there were some politologists, historians, opinion makers, some politicians as well. We can remember Erhard Busek in Austria and others in Germany, in West Germany, of course, who were thinking of what could be the possible solutions to break the divide, which was at that time the Iron Curtain, to break the divide between East and West. So we had all these ideas about federation that were just after the breakup of '89 were completely outdated, forgotten, still, of course, nourishing the reflection. And I think it is something interesting. And also the possible third way, which was something also very popular in the 80s, in the 70s even. And another topic that came to, the only topic that came to be a little bit more of a reality was the regional integration, or the regional identity, which was promoted actually by the Union, and I think with good reason, to also to convince the public opinions that some regions belonged together. There were sometimes, of course, cut by a border, which was a new border, even sometimes after the First World War, sometimes after the Second, and that we should not forget the past, of course, and the links, the relations, the border relations, the border crossing, you know, the Grenzgänger, as we say in German, that were important aspects of this regional cooperation. And I think that was one of the very positive moments, and still is, of the European Union. So I would like now to conclude, because I think I've already been too long. And I would like to come back to Adam's idea about Franz Josef. So, you know, also in the 80s, mid 80s, there was a very big nostalgia of Habsburg Empire, Habsburg Europe, even afterwards, because people said, well, you know, the European Union, we had it already. It was the Habsburg Empire. United army, united money, no borders, no frontiers, equal languages, more or less, inside of the empire. So why should not be the Habsburg Empire should not be the model of the European Union? So sometime at his time, at the end of his time, Franz Josef was seen as a completely outdated monarch. He said to Theodore Roosevelt, "I feel like the last Cavaliers Europas." But in the end, I would joke and say, would Franz Josef not be one of the paternal figures of United Europe, as he was for his peoples, as was the saying at that time? And I know that we are now looking for European personalities to put on the banknotes, on the euro banknotes. And I personally, I would like to propose Franz Josef for one of these banknotes. I know I'm completely fantasizing and joking, but well, maybe not so much. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to hear what is going to be said in the oncoming debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Horel, for your excellent speech. It was really short and snappy, and of course, I'm not going to miss that opportunity that we have you here, and maybe let me abuse a little bit my position. And I would like to pose one question, because as I said before, you are author of a very good, biography of Admiral Horthy. And at the same time, of course, you mentioned in your speech the topic, which is also in Poland very important, namely the politics of memory, Geschichtspolitik. And I would like to ask you, because definitely István will talk quite a lot about upcoming elections in Hungary at the beginning of April. Yeah. So my question would be, what do you think, if you can evaluate a little bit, I know it's almost mission impossible to, in few minutes, really to assess, evaluate the politics of memory of current Hungarian government. But if you can try, especially regarding the interwar period and Admiral Horthy, if you can share with us some your opinions on that.
Well, I think our friend Hegedűs István has something to say as well on this on this topic. And by the way, I'm very pleased to see you, István. We didn't meet for ages.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
First of all, I will not propose Admiral Horthy for a banknote. Be sure of that. But of course, he is quite innocent of what is now made in his name, which is of course absolutely impossible. First, I cannot predict what is going to happen on April 3rd. Nevertheless, I look forward to a change, let's put it like that. And I think we already have very interesting people reflecting on that, what could happen on April 3rd. I said a little bit in my talk that memory politics was much a confusion of history and memory, and that sometimes we should explain to the politicians that it's not the same. The government for many years now is trying to impose its own reading of history in inscribing it into the memory politics, which means moving and removing statues, building fake memorials. Here, of course, I'm referring to the memorial for the German occupation, which is on Szabadság tér, which is an absolute fake, and I cannot detail it. I did it in my book. You had the kindness to recall my book on the Hungarian nation. There is an entire part of the book which is dedicated to the memory politics, so I really cannot reflect on that. But I can only deplore the fact that this confusion between history and memory is missing its point, actually, because if you constantly change the memory landscape of a city, in this case, I'm talking about Budapest, in the end, you miss your point, because people have no idea of what are these memorials made for. They only see the changes. Some part of the civil society, of course, oppose, but they were not vandalized, I shall mention. Only, as I said, for the monument in Szabadság tér, you have, as probably many of you know, in front of this monument, you have the 11 emlékmű, which is the spontaneous contest on the monument. And the perversity of the government is to leave it there, saying, look how democratic we are, look how liberal we are, because opponents can express themselves and put their own opposing monument in front of ours. So we are constantly being constrained to explain to the public opinion, to the citizens, even in Hungary itself. I mean, even for myself, I lectured many times to explain what the government is doing with this absurd politics of memory. That, in the end, I think, I hope, miss the point of obliging the citizens to build a new image of their own history. So you cannot decide only by putting statues at one spot and removing others that people will change their appreciation of history. This is also made by school books, which are also very contestable in Hungary. So the goal of the government, of course, is to have its own agenda with history, with the historical discourse. And it is the task of the historians. And as you know, the Historical Institute of the Academy of Sciences was very, very threatened by, well, as other institutes of the academy, by the government. That also the only people who can really explain what is going on would be make silent. And this is absolutely condemnable. And I really look forward to a real change in this politics, because it's absolutely not sane for a country to have constantly this double discourse. And this double discourse really reminds us of what was before. So there was an official historical discourse, and there was an alternative historical discourse in the families, in circles that were not official and were not able to express themselves. So actually, this reflects we had before. I am very sorry to say we have to reactivate them, because we must really fight for I would not say historical truth, because we all know that it's just a dream, but at least historical debate based on real intellectual reflection.
Merci beaucoup, Köszönöm, of course. I think that we really got food for thought from you, and we can smoothly move to the second part, our roundtable online discussion. Of course, Professor Horel, please stay with us, because after interventions of our panelists, I would like to have a discussion with our viewers and also with you. So the title of our online discussion is in fact CEE Democratic Revolutions and EU Adhesion, overcoming exaggerated divisions between East and West. So first of all, of course, we can say that we have already made some kind of coming out mission statement, because we use this term that we can talk about exaggeration, that these divisions are exaggerated. What does it mean, East and West, in that case? Of course, let's clarify this. But before, let me introduce speakers, and I will start with ladies first. Of course, Iwona Reichardt, a great friend of mine, who is Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Eastern Europe, and also a member of board of the College of Eastern Europe. Then we have David Nonhoff, who is research associate in an Institut für Europäische Politik. Then István Hegedűs, who is the president of Hungarian Europe Society, and last but not least, finally, Beneš, lecturer at Metropolitan Prague University. And all our colleagues are, of course, the members of our team representing organizations of our consortium. So let me start just to maybe steer a little bit discussion. Maybe I will be a little bit provocative. So very briefly, I made small research in Polish media, regional media. I don't speak Hungarian, sorry, but for example, in Czech media, and also in Western media, in German language, in German media or French media. What does it mean when these terms are used? In fact, I wanted to check that. East, West, regarding within the EU, not outside the EU, but within the EU. So, of course, I didn't discover America, but generally these terms are used, especially this term East, to describe, we can say oversimplification, definitely, to describe the countries that joined the EU in 2004, 2007 and 2013. So the Big Bang and generally countries, post-communist countries, because we have to exclude Cyprus and Malta, who joined the EU, and they are sometimes called new member states, a new Europe. And in that case, of course, there is some kind of cliches, stereotypes, some prejudices towards the region, that we can say that there is some kind of perception that, of course, the region has a serious problem with rule of law, democracy, some kind of democratic backsliding, dismantling of rule of law, the problem with media freedom. And if we look, I decided to provide you right now with a little bit eagle's eye view and to share with you some basic data, and then I will ask you to react. So according, for example, to the Freedom House, which of course a prominent US foundation, they regularly every year they publish the report, and according to the rankings, in fact, if we take these countries, so-called East, there is one country which was 4 years ago relegated to the category of partly free countries, namely Hungary, unfortunately, that we unfortunately have a democratic backsliding in Poland, according to the Freedom House, and we can have maybe, unfortunately, Budapest in Warsaw. That's reality. And definitely, according to them, certain countries in the region, for instance, Romania, Bulgaria, besides Poland and Hungary, they also have some more serious problems with the quality of their democracies. If we compare with so-called the West, but in fact we mean in this case the rest of the EU, there is no country, according to the Freedom House, with these kind of problems. The same regarding the Transparency International and the Corruption Perception Index. We can say that below 50, that you have 100 no corruption, no country in the world, and 0 a total corruption, complete corruption. So besides 50, we have Greece from the rest of Europe, and in case of our region, unfortunately, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. And what happened to Hungary is something unbelievable regarding this slide, dramatic, unfortunately. But we have again the problem that if you look at other countries, between 50 and 60 scores, you have Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, Slovenia, Latvia. A lot, sorry. By comparison, Italy and Malta and Cyprus in this group, between 50 and 60, these scores. So again, it doesn't look very nice. Let's put it in that very subtle, delicate way. And then we have media freedom. Of course, we have Reporters Sans Frontières, Reporters Without Borders, and here again we have this the evolution of the media from very difficult situation to good situation, and between these two categories, extreme categories, you have different shades of gray, and you have problematic situation, difficult situation. So again, if you look from this point of view, we have three countries with problematic situation: Poland, Hungary, Croatia, and Hungary going down, unfortunately. Also Poland, but not to such a degree, to the category of difficult situation of the media in Bulgaria. So we have three countries plus Bulgaria, 4 countries from 11. And regarding the rest of Europe, the EU, we have Malta and Greece in the category of problematic countries. So you can see that, yes, there is something, it's not only myth. There is something going on, something negative, but there is also, but like, you know, with the glass half empty or half full. So in that case, we can counter this narrative, this image by saying, okay, there is a huge diversity within the so-called East. You can compare Estonia to Hungary, for instance. You can also you can say that there is no white and black, the EU, that we have Canada versus North Korea. Canada means the West and the East, North Korea. No, we have also certain problems, challenges in the Western Europe regarding the rise of certain far-right radical parties. Look at current, for example, what for example, opinion polls in France. Still, I hope that, to make this more coming out, that Madame Le Pen is not going, in my opinion, to win the elections. Nevertheless, right now she enjoys the support, according to surveys, of 45% of people in the second round, possible second round, because probably she will secure the second round. So I will stop here and I will ask you, all of you, that's a general question. If you can assess, not from the perspective of your country, but that's the first short question, short reaction. What do you think about this division, the East versus West? What is your evaluation? What is your point on that? Please, Iwona, let's start with you.
Okay, so I should speak about the regional perspective?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think about this division, East and West? It's a myth. Let's answer this question. It's a myth or reality?
Okay, I agree with Professor Horel that saying welcome back to Europe was very unjust. And at least the way I was educated, I was educated in a communist time in a primary school, that I was a European. So I also remember this rhetoric, and I remember finding it strange. I knew we were poorer, I knew we were on the other side, but I never thought that we were not European. So for us to get this Europeanized in the 90s, I think we accepted it because we, as I said, economically we were worse off. And I think this had a huge effect on our perception of ourselves in the 90s. And also this perception of the East as not only being maybe democratically less perfect or authoritarian, but also economically. I think this had a huge effect on the perception and the division and the maintenance of the division, because we were the ones who were catching up in many ways. So For our region in the 90s, the West was always perceived as something better. And the question is, was this a myth or reality? I think at that time it was a reality. We were catching up with the democratic processes, adjusting our systems, transferring our systems from non-democratic to democratic, but we're also adjusting economically. And we were doing this because we're driven, and Poland here, as you know, which I'm representing, was a champion of that, or one of the main engines of this process. Of course, nowadays we know what is happening, but at that time we were so determined to join the European Union. And there were different reasons why we wanted to join NATO and the European Union. One of them was our security and also the well-being. And then we joined the European Union in 2004. The dream came true. And together with the European Union, what happened? A lot of people started actually migrating, leaving homes. At that time, unemployment in Poland was extremely high. And a lot of people found jobs in this dreamland in the West, yes, and then this is the really first time when on mass scale people started having the real experience. So reality came with the West. They moved to especially to the UK, and they started discovering that the West is something different than they've been told. They had been told, because they did not only experience the image that they saw on TV, yes, of the wealth and happy life, but they saw that working conditions are not always perfect, that migrants are treated differently than, for example, the British society. So I think the first maybe I don't want to say disappointment, but the reality check came. And then so from the Polish perspective, as you know, in 2015 we had elections that were a turning point, and ever since that Poland is called to be on this backslide, and everybody's surprised why Poland departed from this, you know, we were this engine, etc. And then when we analyze these elections, we also noticed that people who are migrants, who live in the UK and Norway, they don't necessarily vote for the democratic parties in Poland, like the Civic Platform. They actually started voting quite nationalistic. And then we discovered that maybe the experience of living abroad for them, it didn't mean that they learned the lessons of multiculturalism, openness, you know, liberal political values, democracy, freedom of speech. Instead, what we find out is that they enjoyed the welfare state that these countries offered, and that our country was not offering, because we were catching up economically so much that we chose the neoliberal model at the cost of oftentimes of the working people. And that's why many of these people chose the law and justice, which actually started offering what we criticize as a political bribery, but it actually is a economic program to help families that is quite common in the West, like in Germany, the so-called Kindergeld, money for children. Yes, so another reality check. So, you know, there are myths, and throughout the transformation we've been seeing, of course, the myths, but I would not say that the myths are only such that of course the myths glorify, but then the reality comes, and this West that you presented again, Adam, through your statistics, and I 100% agree. I'm not denying any of these phenomena taking place, and I assess them negatively. But the West is not always for people, for the general society, the experience of only this positive, that the statistics show, that the myth shows. Sometimes this is something negative, and I don't want to say that this is only because we are close-minded, nationalistic. I'm really tired with this discourse that what happened to Poland, Poland just went crazy. No, I think Poland did not go crazy in 2015. We made a bad choice, I would say, but I think we need to also make a critical assessment of our transformation and certain mistakes that were made. before that led people to this, to making this electoral choice, to voting for these specific parties. And as I mentioned, one of them was this experience of the West that actually opened eyes to many people in Poland that maybe something is wrong with our economic system. Maybe this West looks differently than we were told before. And here we found parties, political parties that told voters that it's okay to be a little, I don't want to say barbarian, but you don't need to be so cosmopolitan. You don't need to be so liberal. It's okay to have your prejudice. It's okay to be scared of immigrants. And it's okay to want some money, to want the money that people in the West are getting. So unfortunately, this is how it got changed in our case, that the assumption of 2004 was that we will become kind of the same. Yeah, welcome to Europe. But many mistakes were made also by our political leaders and our political parties here. And I think this is coupled with this experience, direct experience with the West that turned out different than expected for many people. That's what led us to what we are today.
Thank you very much, Iwona. I think definitely it is inevitable to overlap this general overview and our country cases. That's of course obvious. So not a problem. Great to bring. Thank you very much for bringing into equation this very important issue of immigration and direct first contact, personal contact with the Western Europe. And of course, you're right that I said that we are diverse in the East, but so-called the West is also very diverse, and you can have very different experiences. So let's move to our, from Polish point of view, Western neighbor, Germany. David, as you know, we have published in our report article written by Simone Klee and Katrin Bottinger, and of course they focus especially on the issue which is very related to 89, namely the reunification of Germany and the legacy of reunification, which is definitely complex one. We can say that this division East and West, nostalgia related to the East Germany is of course still the issue in your country. We have of course different patterns of electoral behavior, voting, specificity of the East Germany, like Alternative für Deutschland, Die Linke, and so on. So please, the floor is yours. Share with us your take. Can you give us your position on that issue, namely the East versus West within the EU and also a little bit within Germany, please.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me and for having this discussion, which I think is a really, really important discussion. It's especially having grown up in Western Germany, I can unfortunately say that many of the myths that we are talking about this divide between Eastern and Western Europe, they are still present in the heads of many Germans, I believe. So I think this is a really, really important endeavor to talk about these myths, to talk about these prejudices, and to try to overcome them. And maybe to give you a personal example, I was born in 1991, so right at the time of the end of the Cold War. And in near the end of high school, many Germans would go abroad for a year, and most wanted to go to the US. The US for us back then, this is like 12 or 13 years ago, was cool, and there was pop culture, and it was exciting and rich. So everybody wanted to go there. I had one friend who went to Poland, and me and my other friends, we couldn't understand. We looked him in the eye and we're like, why? What is Poland? We had no idea. There was no history classes on Poland. There was no public discourse on Poland or on the entire region. So it was kind of blind spot in our upbringing, in our standard high school education. And then maybe a second example. My mother, for example, she's a teacher she's very traditionally Western German, I would say, a French and politics teacher. I hope she's not listening right now. And she still today makes jokes very old jokes about Eastern Europe that really reflect that she has these prejudices in her head, even though she would consider herself a left-wing, liberal, educated woman. She still has these prejudices, and I think that's a very good example of how deeply rooted these are in Western Germany. So I would say, I would say the division between Eastern and Western Europe is definitely it's both. It's a myth and a reality. It's a myth because it's a created idea. It's a created myth by humans. There's this fascinating book by Larry Wolff, Inventing Eastern Europe, where he says that was actually in the Enlightenment, so more than 200 years ago, that thinkers like Voltaire, they invented Eastern Europe as a concept for the first time. Before, people would think in terms of Northern versus Southern Europe, with Southern Europe being the Northern Italian Renaissance area, Florence and so on, being civilized and educated, and the north of the Alps was the barbaric, dark and violent place that nobody wanted to go. And that changed in the Enlightenment when Enlightenment thinkers from cities like Paris or London or the Netherlands started to say, well, there's actually, we are the West, we are the civilized West, and there's the unknown East that is dangerous and exotic, and so on and so forth. So this is definitely a created idea that there is this division in Europe, but obviously it resonates in people's heads still today, and this is what the examples that I gave show. So in that sense, it is today, unfortunately, I would say, still a reality. People do think in these categories, at least in Germany, and it's really important to overcome that. So I'll stop for now. You're on mute still, Adam.
Yes, you're right. I should have muted myself. Thank you very much. By the way, where are you from? Which part of Germany?
Münster in North Rhine-Westphalia.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Northwest Germany, very close to
I know. It's really far from East Germany.
Yes.
Yeah, Deutsche Demokratische Republik. Okay. So maybe right now I will give the floor to Vit. And Vit, please share with us your opinions on this issue of division. And of course, maybe you can say a little bit about the current developments in your country. In Poland, you can quite often meet with this opinion, okay, Czechs managed to stop this authoritarian backsliding and so on because of the most recent election. So please, Vit.
Hello everybody, and thank you for the invitation. Adam, I'm not sure if I will have time actually to get to current situation, because I really wanted to start with a very general perspective. And actually my first point was really kind of philosophical or epistemological. Myth versus reality. I'm not sure we can separate myths from reality, because regardless of how deep we dig in archives, we always end up creating some interpretations of history, creating some myths. So myths are reality, and what we consider reality inescapably becomes a myth, because we are humans. Not just the politicians are humans, but also researchers are humans. Not because we have some bad intentions, but because of our cognition, because of the language we use. We cannot escape making interpretations. Next point, my intention with my presentation was to actually start with a little bit of history, going back to the return to Europe and overcoming the division of Europe. I'm actually very grateful to Catherine for starting on the same level. So I will try to somehow respond and maybe complement. Again, I'm not an historian. I'm a political scientist, so please take that into account. Overcoming the division, the intention or the goal or the rhetorics of overcoming the division really corresponds to what Catherine mentioned. We wanted to get rid of the East-West division because it somehow erased Central Europe, not only from the maps, but also from the thinking of people. So I very much agree and appreciate the reference to Kundera and to his appeal not to forget about Central Europe. I'm also very grateful to Catherine for mentioning the victimization. The victimization is still present in the Czech political discourse, and it is one of the main sources of Euroscepticism, the notion that we are always the victims of great powers, that the great powers are the founding countries very often of the European Union, especially France and Germany. And this contributes to the Euroscepticism. So I very much appreciate it, and I agree that it is a bad thing. How to fight it? The problem is that this sense of victimization is quite deeply rooted. And maybe I will be a bit more provocative. But it's not just the Eurosceptics, it's not just the villains like Václav Klaus. But we can even blame Kundera for taking part in this victimization. I actually took the opportunity of speaking now, and I opened up Kundera's article on the Czech destiny, and you can see in this article from 1960s his loathing or suspicion towards the great powers, his suspicion towards great powers as the ones who tend to suppress, who tend to create uniformity. And in his interpretation, or in my interpretation of Kundera, he is in favor of rebellion against this suppression from the great powers. So it's slightly more complicated. It's not. We may end up in a situation that those who advocate Central Europe as a way of overcoming the East-West division may actually contribute to perpetuating the victimization narrative, which fuels the East-West divide. And this is actually the real-life history of the Visegrad Group. The Visegrad Group was established as a way how to overcome the East-West division by putting Central Europe on the map, and but it was created by mostly small or mid-sized countries, and we ended up in a situation when these small and middle-sized countries, when they were trying to somehow rehabilitate Central Europe, they ended up in the discourse of victimization, being the victims of great powers. They started to become unhappy with being lectured by the advanced advanced Western European countries, or at least that was the interpretation of Central Europeans, that we are being lectured, which was not always the case, because if you remember early 1990s, we were lecturing the West. You know, who am I talking about? I'm talking about Václav Havel, who went to the West and who was lecturing. You may remember his famous lecture in US Congress. So we were not always the one who were being lectured, but we created a myth that we are being lectured. And at a certain point of time, we tried to turn the tables. I remember some of the Czech Eurosceptics arguing, look, we are adults. We no longer accept being lectured. We want you to give lectures. I think it was Sasha Vondra who said that in the early 2000s. And in certain aspects, you may put Orbán into the same category. He is the one who is trying to lecture, who actually at a certain point in time decided to turn the tables and said, okay, you, the West, you became too, how to say it, you lost your moral compass, you lost your true European values, and I'm the one who will lecture you in what it means to be true European. So we, at certain time, I'm talking about early 2000s, decided to turn the table. And we started to speak about New Europe. The narrative was also associated at that time with the geopolitical situation and international relations situation at that time. You may remember that the concept of New Europe was promoted by Rumsfeld at the time of Iraqi crisis. So there was this kind of foreign policy dimension to it also. And it was actually quite happily embraced by quite a few Central European politicians as a way to turn the tables and try to reinvent East as something positive, as not the one who is being lectured, but by the one who is somehow trying to contribute to the European, to lecture Europe. The problem was that the Western Europe this time did not accept lecturing. The Western Europe, or the West generally, did accept being lectured from Václav Havel, but the West did not accept being lectured from Orbán. So we ended up in a situation when our lecturing is no longer accepted and actually contributes to the deepening of the divide between East and West. The lecturing by Havel was a quite successful attempt to rehabilitate Europe, Central Europe, without creating East-West divide. Right now, we are in a situation when the lecturing from people like Orbán is actually deepening the divide. And I think the problem is in the victimization. Havel is or was the one who actually quite explicitly rejected, even in 1960s, Kundera's discourse of small countries being the victims of great powers, and the great powers, that was the discourse of Kundera, that the great powers are somehow treacherous. As far as I remember, or according to my interpretation, Václav Havel already at that time rejected this kind of victimization. And I think that this is one of the sources of his lecturing in 1990s, that he, on one side, did promote Central Europe without falling victim of this victimization stereotype. So that would be my lesson learned. Look, we can and we probably should reinvent ourselves, either as Central Europe or maybe even New Europe. But please do that without the victimization narrative, because if we go that path, it's the path of not being listened to in the West, and it's the path of actually deepening the East-West divide. Yeah, so my contribution is on this kind of general level. We can go towards a bit more specific or down-to-earth recommendations. Recommendations from my side: don't fetishize Visegrad Group. Try to build alliances with great powers. Try to normalize relations with great powers. I think there is a huge opportunity or potential in developing, I don't know, Weimar Triangle or Czech-French bilateral relations. You know, if you go into the history, Czechoslovak and French relations were really deep, not just on the cultural level. That's one of the reasons why actually Kundera chose Paris for his exile, but also on political, military level. If you go into the intra-war Czechoslovakia. So that's the strategy. Try to build alliances with small and mid-sized countries, but please, beyond our region. Why the hell didn't we support Greece more? It was crazy during the economic crisis and migration crisis. Greece was the bad one, or the backward one. That was funny. We in the Central Europe sometimes perceive ourselves as being the laggards, but we always invent countries which are even more laggard than ourselves. And that was Greece during the economic crisis. At that time, we, the Czechs, imagined ourselves as being part of the North, and Greeks were the laggards, the lazy Greeks drinking ouzo, as Václav Klaus mentioned. So that would be my recommendation. Yes, it's sometimes okay to build alliances with small and mid-size, but don't stick just with Central Europe. Try to be more empathetic even with countries like Greece. Yeah, I will stop here, and I already talked too much, and I'm looking forward to what you think about it.
We thank you very much. Definitely, you know, I didn't want to impose anything on you and to talk about the current situation in Czechia. I think it was really great. In fact, you brought some ingredients. We are moving to István, which is really a great person. In fact, he is this witness of history, a former politician, an NGO activist, and a good expert, a really excellent one of authors of articles collected in our report. So really merging and wearing more than 2, 3, in fact 2, 3, 4, 5 hats and hats. I'm sorry. So really, István, as you know, we can say that VIT has already put on the table some ingredients to talk. You know that I like very much your cuisine, especially this famous fish soup, halasle. And in that case, let's talk about Hungary, which is sometimes presented as this really enfant terrible in the region. And we have everything, victimization, with mentioned that, yeah, and we have this Trianon syndrome, of course. We have this idea that maybe that's I will be a little bit provocative. Yeah, it is right. Definitely, there's a strong opposition against Orban in the Western Europe, but there are also many guys who really admire him, and that's something new. And that's that he can say, Orban, yes, I'm a trendsetter to a certain degree. I can be proud of myself that, for instance, you have a book, Cultural Backlash, and there are 3 guys on the cover: Le Pen, Trump, and Orban. That's something, yeah. That's I can say that's a success. I'm joking, of course. I'm ironic right now. So please, István, share with us your position of the country, which is. I would like also from you to hear a little bit about the elections, because they are, as Professor Horel has already mentioned, that these elections are really important. And I think we have right now 6 weeks, yeah, have left. So please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. Just please let me speak just a very few sentences about the general topic, and then I am going to speak about the very Hungarian case and the elections, because certainly I understand that that's more exciting than any historical explanation once again. And I'm not a historian. I might have many hats, but I'm definitely not a historian. But still, I would like to add my maybe naive or amateur ideas to this general discussion, arguing that talking about an East-West divide is not simply an exaggeration, according my view, but it would be a political mistake. And I have some historic examples arguing that there is nothing like historic or cultural determinism. And even if we have, you know, our special history and geographic situation, I can say that, you know, Scandinavia, you know better than I, many of you are historians, had a very, you know, different history in the 19th century. And following that period, these peasant societies had a much more successful historical track. And when you mentioned corruption, that made me think about Scandinavia. Now they are number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on, regarding the fight against corruption or lack of corruption. No one would have imagined it, I think, 100 or 150 years ago. And other countries might have had a different historic track. Maybe we were a little bit less luckier than Sweden, which was neutral in the 20th century. But I have just listened to another presentation the other day by Timothy Snyder about Ukraine, and that I would like to add, even Ukraine, which is really East Europe or Eastern Europe, had a history which is, you know, what he said is normal, is very much a typical European history. And I understand that there is a time difference regarding our development in what I would call Central Europe or East Central Europe. And certainly that's true for Eastern Europe, Ukraine or Russia and so on. But in many cases, I would say that when you talked about Franz Josef, till the beginning of the First World War, actually the Central European region and mostly Hungary was able to catch up, and it has become more and more a normal or typical European country again after a long history before the Turks invaded these regions and beyond our region. So to put it very shortly, I think that the future is open because the past is open too, as some people say, how we interpret it. And we shouldn't accept this, very mythical, but very unjustifiable dividing line saying that this is East and West. I think, and this is my last point about history, because again, I'm not a historian, the communist period made it even worse. Certainly the Iron Curtain, which language was used mostly on the West, maybe we here in the East, I mean, in the Eastern Bloc, that's another expression, what was used mostly in the West. In the Warsaw Pact countries, I would say, or a Soviet satellite state, we knew that there is nothing like a real Iron Curtain, but some people in France or Germany believed that there is an existing physical Iron Curtain between the two political systems. So when we had a different political system, that created a real dividing line. Now, what happened in 1989, that was very important, that in Hungary, and I think in many other countries around us, we did not want to invent something very special, something very new, which is different from the Western model. We wanted to go back to Europe, even if it is a strange expression, and maybe we were before that in Europe, a European country, and many other neighboring countries too. But what we had in mind in Hungary and in other countries, that was the unification of Europe. And as a political system, we wanted, it was the liberal era, a liberal democracy similar to the Western established democratic models, nothing really new. Well, there were some ideas about the third way, and there were some ideas about especially in the interwar period, a Hungarian Switzerland, a sort of different non-capitalist future. These all evaporated in 89 and 1990. And it was not only realpolitik, but that was the wish of most of the political parties and intellectuals and political entrepreneurs who got votes at the election, which probably expressed the wish of the people that we want to join the West. So the West is still an existing category in my mind, and I think in Hungary and beyond, where originally in 89-90, we wanted to belong to. We wanted to belong to the democratic community of Europe. And that was the wonderful idea back in 1989. Certainly, in most cases, liberal ideas came together with the idea of getting back sovereignty, either from the Soviet Union as a satellite state or a real sovereignty, like in the case of the Baltic countries, which were not independent from the Soviet Union. Now, what I would like to add very shortly, that 1989 as a liberal era, and I mean also in economic terms, market reforms and market freedoms which were introduced logically led to our accession to the European Union. So the unification of Europe has actually happened. It has occurred, and I agree that it was a success story. It took a little bit long, from 1989, 15 years in our case, and in most cases, and people were not happy that this process was so long, and there were a lot of misunderstandings about the accession procedures and processes, how it happened. But on the other hand, it's true that because we joined the West, it created a psychological situation when we were the students and the Westerners were our teachers, and the European institutions have become the teachers, who the Commission had each year a sort of progress report saying how far we actually went ahead. This again created a sort of inferiority feeling, what we already had towards the West, which was richer and much more democratic and was luckier in the last 40 years. Now, a big jump ahead. What happened later on? When Viktor Orbán got back to power once again in 2010 with a huge 2/3 majority, he somehow misused these ambivalent feelings of the people to the West. We wanted to copy the West, but we also were a little bit hurt that they were luckier than us. And there were already some myths very well known in Hungary that, for example, the Western countries did not help us in 1956 during our revolution. This was not a real political assumption, but a complaint in general against the West, which left us in the Soviet Eastern Bloc. So there were some roots, certainly, in the Hungarian mentality, which could have been used by Orbán and his friends to create, in a very short period, a sort of anti-Brussels rhetoric. When they invented the story that Brussels wants to colonize us, you wouldn't have thought in 2004, or especially in 1991, let's say, that this rhetoric would be possible by a ruling party in Hungary without losing the next elections. And it did not lose the next election, but won once again with a 2/3 majority. But I would still argue that Fidesz won elections in sequence, not because of their specific anti-European rhetoric, but very often in contrast to that. So when we try to find the reasons why populist, authoritarian, and semi-authoritarian parties, we have now a hybrid regime in Hungary, you know, it's not a full-fledged dictatorship. It's not a liberal democracy anymore. We are somewhere in between. So why these parties could win elections? The explanation is mostly rooted not in the Eurosceptic or anti-European rhetorics of these parties, at least in Hungary, but I think it's true elsewhere also, but because of many other phenomena. And that brings back to my point that we shouldn't exaggerate the East-West divide, because what we see today, and maybe I say it because I'm not a historian, but I think this is a very 21st century phenomenon, what we see today. And in different countries, political parties and charismatic leaders might use history and memory on their own side. And in the case of Hungary, Orbán uses the Horthy era, what we discussed already, and it changed the landscape around the parliament, bringing back statues. And Orbán and his government has a new narrative about the Second World War, 1956, the fall of communism, and so on and so on. That's all true. In some cases, it reminds us not the Horthy regime, but even the 50s, the Rákosi regime, in rhetoric at least. When Orbán and Fidesz mobilizes its people, he calls it, or an NGO which supports Orbán and is certainly financed by the state budget, argues that this is a peace march, which is exactly the same rhetoric what in the 50s was used when they say that this is a peace fight. Even coal mining was part of peace fight in the 50s. Now it's a peace march against Brussels. So it reminds me to the rhetoric of the 50s as well. But what we have today is a regime which is illiberal, populist, semi-authoritarian, which is a 21st century phenomenon. And what I want to say that in that sense, if we forget about the historic roots and the past dependency, what we all have, it's striking how much Hungarian populism, illiberalism, Polish populism and illiberalism are more or less the same, like Trump's political rhetoric or Marine Le Pen's political rhetoric. The enemy, the outgroup, how they talk about migrants, minorities, LGBTQ rights groups, liberals, secular Europeans, European liberal elites, Brussels, then it's strikingly the same language. So what I would like to say that partly independently how these political parties grasp political power, now they are united in a way in their rhetoric, anti-European sentiments, and so on. So we have to find other reasons. And certainly there are other reasons how they got to power, how they misused, created an authoritarian rhetoric, seducing voters mostly on the traditional right, but also integrating in their camps those with a new right-wing identity politics who probably would not have voted for conservatives, but at least at the last elections in Hungary, they did so. Now, what might happen on the 3rd of April in Hungary? That is a very open question, and I don't know the answer. What I can tell you that there were some changes, as you probably all know, and now we have a more or less united opposition in Hungary. This is a very strange coalition of different parties, including former extremists like Jobbik, which was even more on the far right than Fidesz a couple of years ago, but moved to the center, and today it's a sort of national conservative Christian party. Not everybody is liberal. In a coalition of parties, which had to make a coalition before the elections because of the election rules and not after an election. So we are not in Germany. These parties had to create a coalition in order to have any chance to beat Orban. And they have only one candidate now in each constituency against one candidate of Fidesz. That's the only chance how to overcome a populist party. Now, what are the chances? The chances are not bad, actually. We have a new prime minister candidate who doesn't come from the very left or from the traditional liberal scene from Budapest, but he, as you know, comes from a small town, more a village, maybe I would say, a big village, a small town, from a rural area, from a right-wing area, where he already won a couple of years ago, and he is the mayor of that small town. Now, he describes himself as a conservative Christian and Christian Democrat center-right candidate. What I would like to add is that he's a conservative liberal. He doesn't emphasize it, but it's important that he is not a fundamentalist Christian. He doesn't want to introduce Catholic education at state universities or anything like that. He certainly represents the political program of the 6 parties, and he seems to be a tolerant guy also in religious issues. But he is the guy who might seduce in the center, if we have people like that, is still in the center, undecided voters, former Fidesz voters who are now fed up with Orban. And he has the chance to open up the camp towards these guys and to have extra voters for the opposition. Now, that is the chance. We have a lot of problems. The 6 parties are still quarreling with each other. And maybe the candidate of the opposition made some mistakes. That's also might be a problem in political communication. But it seems to be that Orban and Fidesz is not so strong enough. According to the polls, the chances are 50-50. Now the opposition needs more than 50. 53, 45, because of the electoral rules and because of the constituencies. After so many gerrymandering, 50% plus 1 vote would not be enough. But first time after 12 years, the race is open, and there might be hopes that this illiberal anti-European course will be over soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, István, for your intervention. I'm very grateful that you focused on the elections because, as we already said several times, they are very important. By the way, David, you raised your hand. Yeah, do you want to say something?
Depends on the time. I thought I was invited to present some results on the. Yeah, okay. Because I just wanted to jump in on what István said about many, like the Hungarian population being pro-European and actually not supporting the values that, or not supporting most of the values that Orban stands for, because we've just done a study on exactly this. And maybe I can take 1 minute or two to share the results because it really fits. Let me share my screen. So we asked people in Central and Eastern Europe about their opinion on the values that are displayed here. So, and these are the values that are written down in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union. So pluralism, rule of law, rights of minorities, and so on and so forth. And we found that there is an overall support of these values. These values are supported, almost all of them, by more than half of the population. Many people don't have specific ideas about these values, so they answered neutral, and only a minority of like 15 to 25% disagrees with these values. And I'm sure that if we did a similar study in Western European countries, we would probably find exactly the same results. Another example is this is their assessment of the accession to the European Union of the respective countries, and we see an overall support or positive assessment on the effects of the accession to the European Union across all countries that we surveyed. 76% of the respondents of these countries said, my country should learn from the European Union and not the other way around. So this is exactly contrary to what Viktor Orban says, who says, who's turning around the narrative and says now Western Europe has to learn from us. The population doesn't go along with that, as shown in this slide. And well, the one big outlier that we found was asylum policy. But again, I think we would find similar results in many Western European countries. But this was the only value where you could really see, okay, more people are against an open asylum policy than are in favor of it. But so in general, we found that disagreement with potential disagreement with liberal or European values cannot be the explanation for Viktor Orban or Kaczynski. That's, yeah. That was my point. And now I try to stop sharing my, here it is, okay, sorry.
Thank you very much, David. Of course, we don't have time to discuss that, but the devil is in the details, yeah? For example, attitude to immigrants, refugees, in our region, that's according to many surveys, opinion poll, we can say quite often depends on their religious background. For example, there is a problem with Islamophobia, definitely, in our countries, quite often higher than, for instance, in certain Western European countries. But again, you can find examples of Western European countries. So we can talk and talk. Unfortunately, we don't have a time next time, but you definitely showed certain contradictions that certain parties really enjoy popularity, and at the same time, the society quite often there is no overlapping between their electorate on certain important issues, but still people support in these parties during elections. That's a problem. Vit, you wanted to add something? No. So maybe. Really, I'm very sorry because we are running out of time. Maybe I will ask Professor Horel if you want to add something, maybe wrap up. It's a little bit like, you know, Urbi et Orbi, the message of our Pope. Please, if you want to do something like that, maybe you yeah, I learned quite a lot. Thank you very much for your intervention. So maybe, Professor Horel, you can share with us your impressions from you may be also some lessons learned from or drawn from our debate. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you. No, I will not monopolize the debate now. I learned myself also a lot from your interventions, and I would really now join with István to say that we have to observe what is going to take place in Hungary on the 3rd of April, because it could have consequences, I mean, positive consequences for not only for Hungary itself, of course, herself, but also to break up this, to bring this divide we were talking about, and maybe to inspire other changes in Europe. And I was in Poznan at the beginning of January, and I had the chance to talk with many of my colleagues there, historians, fellow historians, and some of them said, well, maybe if Hungary succeeds in reversing this Orban period, maybe that should be something for us to learn from. So I'm only an historian. I'm not a politologist. I'm not a prophet either, nor a magician. So let's hope for the best, and also that the citizens take their fate again in their own hands. And I think that would be a very positive sign also for the West, because you were all right, all of you, to insist on the fact that it is the West which also creates the divide and maintains the divide. So if Hungary would come back to what happened in '89 and be the force behind which some other countries could unite, that would be a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Sorry,
you are muted
again. I forgot. Thank you very sorry for that. Thank you very much. That was really, I think, Urbi et Orbi, the message. And of course, we are right now going to watch our documentary movie. By the way, István is definitely one of our heroes interviews in this movie, so you will see him again. And of course, we had also some questions, but unfortunately we don't have a time on our chat. For example, from Piotr Sula, there was a question about the question is if the people understood that notion of pluralism. That's a crucial question. What does it mean for people? Things like pluralism, gender equality, and so on. Sometimes, of course, we have to scratch the surface. And the devil is in the details. Definitely for another discussion. And Shamal Hussein, does the immigration process from Middle East affecting the process of democracy in Europe? Yes, that as I said, definitely this is the issue in the region, not only in the region, but again, no time. So right now, we are not going to have concluding remarks, closing remarks after the movie, because I think right now we should. I would like to thank you very much. I'm very grateful for your interventions. It was really great, a great pleasure for me. And I hope also that our audience really enjoyed our discussion. And right now, I would like to encourage all of you very much to watch our movie. And that's the end of our project, but I hope it's just the beginning of a very beautiful friendship, because in fact, we still cooperate. And the topic, for instance, on the reunification of Germany with Institut für Europäische Politik. So we are staying in touch. See you soon. Watch the movie. It's really, I think it's a very nice movie. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.